Emma Walker's heels echoed softly against the marble lobby floor as she stepped into the building of Sterling and Brown, one of the most prestigious marketing firms in the city. The early morning sun reflected off the glass facade, painting the space in shades of gold. She paused near the security desk, took a calming breath and adjusted her blazer. Her heartbeat was steady but firm. She had worked too hard for this moment. At 26, Emma had done everything by the book. Top of her class in university, endless internships, certifications, part-time jobs to support herself, and always showing up early, always doing more than what was asked. She was excited and proud. She didn't get this job because someone made a phone call for her. She earned it. The receptionist greeted her with a smile and handed her a visitor badge. "Welcome to Sterling and Brown, Ms. Walker. You'll be reporting to Mr. Daniel Crow on the 16th floor. The elevator's just around the corner." Emma thanked her and made her way to the elevator. She glanced at the mirror-polished doors and straightened her posture. Her reflection looked confident, poised. Exactly how she wanted to be seen. The elevator chimed and she stepped in, pressing the button marked 16. As the floors rose, her mind fluttered with thoughts. About new beginnings, about doing meaningful work, about making her family proud. Her mom had cried on the phone the night she got the offer letter. When the elevator doors opened, she was met with a clean, modern space. White walls, soft lighting, elegant glass partitions, and the buzz of keyboards and light chatter. It was everything she imagined a corporate job would look like. A secretary greeted her and led her to Daniel Crow's office. "He's expecting you." The door to his office was open. Daniel looked up from his laptop when she walked in. He was tall, mid-40s, clean-cut, dressed in a dark suit with a light blue tie. He stood up and extended a hand. "You must be Emma Walker," he said with a smile that felt a little too wide. "Welcome aboard." Emma smiled and shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Crow. I'm excited to be here." He held her hand a beat longer than necessary. "Call me Daniel," he said, eyes locked on hers. Then, almost casually, he glanced her over, head to toe, slowly, not like someone noticing her outfit, like someone assessing her. Emma's smile faltered slightly. She quickly recovered. Maybe she was imagining it. Daniel gave her a quick orientation, showing her the main departments, the break room, the conference rooms. As he spoke, he walked close, uncomfortably close. At first, she chalked it up to personality. Some people just didn't understand personal space. But then he leaned in while explaining how the company used its proprietary analytics platform. So close she could feel the heat of his breath on her cheek. She stepped slightly to the side, but he didn't seem to notice or didn't care. Back at her desk, a modest cubicle with a view of the city, Emma tried to shake the discomfort. She opened her emails, organized her notes, and got to work. She didn't want to start her new job making assumptions. Everyone said Daniel was intense but brilliant. He demanded excellence. Maybe this was just his way. But as the day progressed, the feeling only grew. At lunchtime, Emma found herself in the cafeteria, tray in hand, looking for a place to sit. She didn't know anyone yet, so she picked a small table in the corner. A minute later, Daniel appeared. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, though he was already pulling out a chair. Emma nodded politely. "Sure." He asked her questions. Some about work, how she liked the office so far, what her first impressions were. But then he shifted. "Where do you live?" "Not far," she said. "Just a few subway stops away." "Alone?" That caught her off guard. "Yes." He nodded, biting into his sandwich. "Living alone at your age. That's bold. Independent. I like that." Emma smiled tightly. "Got a boyfriend?" The question was delivered with a grin, playful on the surface. But his eyes, they weren't playful. She looked down at her food. "No, I'm focused on work." "A woman like you? Smart, confident, beautiful." He chuckled. "Hard to believe." Emma laughed it off nervously. "I guess I scare people away." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Let's hope not." The rest of the conversation blurred in her mind. She answered politely, then excused herself quickly when she finished eating. Back at her desk, she felt unsettled. She tried to push it away, to focus on the spreadsheet she was reviewing. The next few days followed a similar pattern. He would walk past her desk slowly, his eyes lingering on her for just a second too long. He'd lean over her shoulder to check on her work, when there was no need. Once she even felt his breath on the back of her neck. She flinched. He'd comment on her clothes. "That dress suits your figure well. You wear confidence like perfume." She never knew how to respond. There was always a double meaning. Always something she couldn't quite name but could feel in her bones. One morning she arrived early and found Daniel already at her desk. "Good morning," she said, surprised. "Just reviewing some of your work," he said, smiling. "Wanted to get a head start." He handed her a printed report. His fingers brushed against hers as she took it. She pulled back slightly, but he didn't react. As she read the report, he stood too close again, looking over her shoulder. Her pulse quickened. She wanted to ask him to step back. But how do you say that to your boss without sounding rude or paranoid? It wasn't just her imagination. She knew it wasn't. Still, she said nothing. A week later, during a long staff meeting in the conference room, Daniel sat across from her. She could feel his eyes on her, even when she wasn't looking directly at him. When she glanced up mid-presentation, he was staring. Not at her face, but at her legs, her blouse, her lips. Not with admiration. With hunger. With possession. Her stomach twisted. She folded her arms. Adjusted her blazer. Shifted in her seat. After the meeting, she ducked into the restroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face looked pale, her eyes tired. This wasn't how she imagined her first job would be. She wasn't weak, but she felt trapped. That evening, as she left the building, a woman from the finance department approached her in the parking lot. Her name tag read Tasha. "Hey," Tasha said gently. "You're Emma, right?" "Yes. I just wanted to say, if you ever feel uncomfortable here, you're not alone." Emma's heart skipped. "I'm sorry." Tasha looked around before continuing. "Daniel does this to new hires. The young ones. Especially if they're," she hesitated, "pretty." Emma felt a chill run down her back. "Has anyone reported him?" "Plenty. But he's careful. Never says the wrong thing. Never touches. HR never finds evidence. Just be careful." That night Emma couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the shadows of the blinds casting prison bars across her wall. She wanted this job. She needed it. But every day she walked on eggshells. She didn't feel respected. She didn't feel safe. The next day she started keeping a journal. April 9th, 9:15 a.m. Daniel commented on my feminine presence in the meeting. April 10th, 2 p.m. He stood behind me for too long. Could feel him watching my screen. Said nothing for 30 seconds. April 12th, 11:30 a.m. Asked if I ever got lonely living alone. Smiled when I said sometimes. She documented everything. But the weight didn't lift. The more she recorded, the more she saw how often it happened. How subtle yet constant it was. The glances. The hovering. The casual comments wrapped in compliments. Then came the breaking point. One Friday afternoon, Daniel called her into his office. She walked in with her usual notepad, ready to take notes. He shut the door behind her. He smiled. "I've noticed you've been distant lately," he said. Emma straightened. "I've just been focused on work, sir." "That's good," he said, walking around the desk and leaning against it, facing her. "But you don't seem happy." "I'm just adjusting," she said carefully. He tilted his head. "I want this to be a place where you thrive. And I can help with that. I've mentored a lot of women here." She nodded slowly. He continued. "There's a big project coming up. High visibility. It would be a great opportunity for you. But you'd need to work closely with me. Late nights. Strategy sessions. Just the two of us sometimes." Emma swallowed hard. "I'm willing to work hard. Always." His smile widened. "I'm sure you are." She left the office shaking. This wasn't mentorship. This was manipulation. She called Claire that night, her voice trembling. "I can't do this anymore. I feel like I'm being hunted in silence. I'm drowning." Claire didn't hesitate. "Then leave. No job is worth your dignity." Emma gave her resignation the following Monday. She didn't cry in front of Daniel. She didn't explain. Just handed him the letter and said, "Thank you for the opportunity." Daniel smiled. I'm surprised. I thought you were made of stronger stuff. She smiled softly. I am. That's why I'm leaving. She packed her things in silence. Her coworkers watched with confusion, but nobody asked. Tasha gave her a quiet nod as she walked out. The elevator doors closed behind her. She exhaled. Outside it was raining. Emma stood on the sidewalk, soaked, broken, but somehow freer. As the water ran down her face, she whispered to herself, "One day you'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." And that was the beginning of a much bigger story. Emma didn't go home right away after resigning. She walked blocks and blocks in the rain with no umbrella, her leather shoes darkening with each soaked step. Her blouse clung to her skin, and her hair flattened under the downpour. But she didn't care. For the first time in weeks, her heart felt clear, even if it was heavy. She ended up at a small diner a few blocks from the office, the kind with greasy coffee, friendly staff, and cracked booths. She slid into a seat and ordered a coffee, ignoring the curious glance from the waitress who noticed her wet clothes. The warm cup in her hands was comforting, but her mind was spinning. Why didn't I speak up sooner? Why didn't I fight back? Did I just give up everything I worked for? These questions hurt more than Daniel's glances or his hovering presence, because they weren't about him. They were about her. Her silence. Her helplessness. Her retreat. And yet, was it really retreating? In her heart, she knew it wasn't. She hadn't run away from the job. She had walked away from a toxic battlefield, from invisible weapons, from a war fought without bullets but with smirks, words, and control. Still, it felt like defeat. Over the next few weeks, Emma kept mostly to herself. She told her mother that she left the job because it wasn't the right fit. She didn't want to worry her. She told her friends she was taking a break to reassess her direction. But inside she was broken in a very quiet way. Not shattered, no, but cracked. Deeply. She updated her resume but avoided applying. Every time she opened a job post, her chest tightened. What if the next manager was like Daniel too? What if it's worse? What if this was just what the corporate world was like? The thought that she might not belong in the world she worked so hard to enter made her feel like a stranger in her own skin. And then came the guilt. Some nights she would lie awake and whisper to the ceiling, "What if someone else is going through it now?" She remembered Tasha. The quiet warnings. The nods of sympathy. All the women who never said it out loud, but whose eyes held secrets. The thing about non-physical harassment is that it leaves no bruises. No scars. No torn clothes or dramatic scenes. It's invisible. It floats under the surface like a cold current pulling you down. And yet it's real. So real. Emma's journal became her therapist. She wrote for hours some days. Everything Daniel ever said. Everything she remembered. Everything she wished she had said back. She even drafted letters to HR, to the CEO, to the company board. But she never sent them. Not yet. Not because she was scared, but because she realized she was playing a longer game now. One evening, while having tea with her old university professor, Dr. Bennett, Emma finally opened up. He was a sharp, gray-haired man with gentle eyes and a quiet brilliance. He had always believed in her. She told him everything, from Daniel's subtle stares to the creepy questions, the pressure, the power plays, the emotional toll. Dr. Bennett listened without interruption. When she finished, her voice barely above a whisper, he finally said, "Emma, what he did was real. And wrong. And dangerous. And I want you to hear this from someone who's seen many students struggle with this kind of abuse. You did not overreact. You acted with dignity." Emma's eyes filled with tears. No one had told her that before. "You're one of the smartest students I've taught," he continued. "But what sets you apart is not your intelligence. It's your moral compass. That compass is rare in corporate corridors. The world needs leaders like you. The kind who don't just climb the ladder, but change the structure of it." That conversation lit a quiet fire in her. Emma realized something. Maybe she wasn't done with corporate life. Maybe she was just getting started. In the following months, Emma took time to rebuild. Not just her career but herself. She began therapy. She joined online groups for women who had experienced harassment in the workplace. For the first time, she saw her story reflected in others' words. She wasn't alone. And that gave her strength. She applied to graduate school and got into a prestigious MBA program. There, she thrived not just academically but as a voice for ethical leadership. She gave talks. She helped organize panels about workplace boundaries. She wrote articles that got published in women's business magazines. Her story reached people. One article titled "When Silence Speaks Louder: How Workplace Power Can Be Abused Without a Single Touch" went viral. In it she wrote, "People think harassment is only what they see in the news. Hands, force, scandals. But the more common kind is silent. It's a stare that strips your comfort. A compliment with sharp teeth. A culture that says, you're imagining it. We need to redefine harassment and reclaim our space." That article landed on the desk of a board member at Sterling & Brown. But Emma didn't know that. Not yet. She was busy building her empire. By the time she turned 31, Emma had become a sought-after consultant for workplace culture reform. She helped design harassment response policies for major firms. She spoke at leadership conferences. She helped build safer environments, not just for women, but for anyone who felt powerless in powerful places. And then the unexpected happened. She received an anonymous message through LinkedIn. "Sterling & Brown is restructuring. The board wants a new direction. Your name came up. Are you interested in talking?" Emma stared at the message for a long time. The company that once let her walk away silently now wanted to hear her voice. It was poetic. But Emma wasn't thinking about poetry. She was thinking about justice. Emma stared at the message on her screen for what felt like hours. "Sterling & Brown is restructuring. The board wants a new direction. Your name came up. Are you interested in talking?" 1,000 thoughts swirled through her mind. Anger, confusion, pride, fear, memories. Was this some sort of joke? A trick? Why would the company that once ignored her silent pleas for help, allowing a predator to haunt her daily, now come back to her like this? She hadn't worked there in years. And yet, her heart beat just a little faster. Not from fear this time, from something else. Opportunity. But still, she didn't reply immediately. She went for a walk. It was late afternoon, and golden sunlight poured between the tall buildings of the city. She passed the same streets she had once walked, soaked and heartbroken after resigning. But now, she was different. Not just stronger, sharper. She didn't just survive, she had grown. She had built something. That message wasn't luck. Her work, her voice, had reached places she couldn't have imagined when she was crying quietly in a diner booth years ago. But before she could even think about going back, she needed clarity. So she reached out to one of her contacts in the industry, a woman named Clarissa, a former HR executive now working independently as a consultant for board evaluations. Clarissa didn't sugarcoat things. "They probably want you for one of two reasons: reputation management or real change," she said bluntly during their Zoom call. "If it's the first, walk away. But if it's the second, maybe it's your time." Emma leaned forward. "How do I tell the difference?" Clarissa smiled. "Ask them who's still there." The next day, Emma agreed to a video meeting with the board's hiring committee. She expected stiff suits, generic smiles, and vague promises. But what she found surprised her. The new chairman, Mr. Hadley, was a quiet but firm man in his late 60s. His tone was respectful. "Honest. We read your article," he said without wasting time. "We've had a cultural reckoning here. Some of us believe we failed our people. Some didn't see the signs. Some chose not to. But what matters now is that we're trying to rebuild. From the inside out." Emma listened carefully. She watched their faces. No eye-rolling. No defensiveness. And then came the question she had feared most. Mr. Hadley said, "We know you left because something was deeply wrong. We don't know all of it. But we want to." Emma sat still. She had the floor now. She could say anything. But she didn't name Daniel. Not yet. Instead she asked, "Is he still there?" Silence. Then Mr. Hadley sighed. "Daniel Wade? Yes. He's now a senior director in one of the product divisions." Emma's stomach turned. So he was still there. Still climbing. Still moving up as if nothing ever happened. That was the moment she made her decision. "I'll take the meeting," she said. "But I want full control of the culture team. I want to audit every complaint from the last 10 years. And if I find rot, I'm cutting it out." Mr. Hadley didn't flinch. Understood. Weeks later, the announcement was public. Emma Lane appointed as new CEO of Sterling & Brown. The media exploded. Articles were everywhere. Survivor returns to lead. The reformer CEO. From victim to victor. But Emma wasn't interested in headlines. She had a mission now. Not revenge. She stepped into the tall glass building with calm determination. People stared. Whispers followed her through the hallways. Some smiled. Others avoided eye contact. She wasn't surprised. Not everyone wanted change. Some people had learned to live comfortably in the shadows of silence. But Emma had lived in that shadow before. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. She didn't go straight to Daniel's department. Not yet. First, she met with every team head. Listen. Ask the questions no one had ever dared to ask. What makes this a safe place or an unsafe one for you? Have you ever felt unheard here? What kind of leader do you need? Then she brought in Clarissa to conduct an anonymous company-wide climate survey. The results were eye-opening. Over 30% of women reported experiencing inappropriate comments or gestures. 40% had never reported them. Several had quietly resigned over time, with no investigations ever opened. Emma read every single comment. Some made her cry. Others made her furious. One line stuck with her. We all knew about Daniel. We just didn't know what to do. It was like a punch to the chest. So they knew. They all knew. A few weeks later, Emma scheduled a meeting with Daniel Wade. She didn't send it through her assistant. She sent the calendar invite herself. No subject line. Just, let's talk. Emma Lane. He accepted immediately. When he walked into her office, Emma noticed something right away. He didn't look nervous. He still wore that overconfident smirk. A little more aged, a little more polished, but still smug. Like he thought he had the upper hand still. Emma, he said, smiling. Wow. CEO, huh? Life is full of surprises. She looked at him for a long moment before replying. Some surprises are overdue, she said calmly. He chuckled. Look, I know we never really got along, but I'm sure we can work together now, clean slate and all. Emma didn't smile. I didn't call you here for a clean slate, she said, voice steady. I called you here because there are some things we're going to discuss. About the past. About complaints. About your behavior. Daniel blinked, but the smirk didn't completely fade. Complaints? What are you talking about? Emma slid a folder across the desk. Inside it were printed statements from former employees. Anonymous surveys. Even a few emails that had been recovered. Daniel's smile faded. Emma leaned forward. People said you made them uncomfortable. They said your presence felt like a threat, even when you didn't touch them. I know what that's like, Daniel, because I lived it. He opened his mouth to respond, but Emma raised a hand. You don't get to explain it away. Not anymore. In the days that followed, Emma launched a full internal investigation. A neutral third-party firm was brought in. Employees who had once stayed silent now spoke up. Others wrote in support of the changes Emma was making. Some resisted. Rumors started. Whispers that Emma was too emotional, making it personal, digging up the past. But she held steady. One afternoon she stood in front of the entire company, over 600 employees, and gave a speech. I didn't return to punish anyone, she said. I came back to protect the next person who would have gone through what I did. She paused. There is no such thing as harmless power games. No such thing as just a look or just a vibe. When people feel unsafe, they stop creating. They stop innovating. They shrink. And I won't lead a company full of shrinking souls. I want a place where people rise. The room was silent. But her message rang in every corner of that building. A few days later, Daniel's fate was finalized. The investigation concluded that he had indeed violated the company's ethical code, not through one major scandal, but through years of predatory behavior hidden in plain sight. His termination was swift. Emma didn't gloat. She didn't throw a party. She simply signed the paper, handed it to HR, and went home early that day. But when she stepped outside, something happened. She saw a group of young employees, 2 women, 1 man, sitting on a bench outside the building. They looked up as she passed. One of them, a shy-looking woman in a lavender blouse, gave her a small smile and said softly, Thank you. Emma paused, nodded, and smiled back. That was it. But it was everything. At home, Emma poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city lights blinked in the distance. Her phone buzzed with emails, congratulations, media requests. She ignored them. She was thinking about that rainy day years ago. The diner. The broken feeling. And how far she had come. Power wasn't about titles. Or offices. Or money. It was about what you do when the system forgets to protect people, and you choose to be the protection yourself. Emma knew this wasn't the end of her story, but it was the end of Daniel's chapter in it. And for now that was enough. After Daniel's termination, the office felt different. There was no grand celebration. No streamers. No applause. Just a heavy, quiet shift in the air, like a curtain had been pulled back and people were now seeing the stage clearly for the first time. Emma knew the hardest part wasn't firing Daniel. The hardest part was what came after. On her first Monday back in full CEO mode, Emma entered the office early. She carried no assistant, no entourage, just her coffee and a leather notebook. She walked the floor on purpose, passing through departments she once avoided, now walking like she belonged. People looked up from their desks. Some nodded. Some quickly turned back to their screens. Emma didn't need them all to like her. She needed them to know. She saw everything now. And she wasn't turning away anymore. In her first senior leadership meeting, things got tense quickly. Her new initiatives were bold, too bold according to some. She wanted a third-party mental health support line, quarterly internal culture audits, mandatory leadership training on emotional intelligence and unconscious bias. But it was her final announcement that really stirred the pot. She said, "We're introducing an anonymous reporting system with whistleblower protection. All complaints go directly to a third-party legal group. Not HR. Not internal filters. Full transparency." A pause. Then the resistance started. One of the VPs, a tall man in his mid-50s named Greg, leaned back in his chair. "That kind of system invites drama," he said coolly. "Anyone with a grudge can file nonsense." Emma looked directly at him. "Do you trust your people, Greg?" He hesitated. "I trust most of them." "Then you have nothing to worry about," she replied. "Unless there's something we should worry about." The room went quiet. Later that week, Emma got her first angry email from a board member. It wasn't about Daniel. It was about the budget. "You're spending too much money on programs that don't generate profit. Our shareholders don't care about therapy sessions or surveys. They care about returns." Emma stared at the email for a long time. Then she wrote one line back. "They will care when lawsuits hit. Prevention is cheaper than crisis." She hit send. She knew this was the price of real power, not just making decisions but facing the pushback from people who had lived too long in comfort zones. Things got even harder when the anonymous reporting system went live. Within 72 hours, they received 9 new complaints. Most were small, passive-aggressive remarks, exclusion from meetings, dismissive attitudes. But 2 stood out. One involved a senior developer named Carl who had repeatedly cornered junior employees in break rooms, asking personal questions and commenting on their appearance. The other, a department head who often joked about women in leadership being too emotional for tough decisions. Emma read them all, and she felt a storm brewing. At her next leadership meeting, she brought up the complaints. "I know this makes some of you uncomfortable," she said, "but these are real people. Real stories. If we ignore them, we are no better than before." Again, Greg raised an eyebrow. "Don't you think you're being a little too aggressive? These are just cultural adjustments. They'll sort themselves out." Emma closed her laptop slowly and looked around the room. "Let me be very clear," she said. "Sterling and Brown doesn't tolerate fear culture anymore. And if you think that makes me aggressive, then I suggest you reread the definition of leadership." She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She simply stood her ground. And for the first time, some of the younger leaders in the room nodded in quiet support. But outside the boardroom, another storm was rising. Media. Some anonymous source leaked internal changes to a business blog. The headline read, "New CEO makes enemies. Inside the quiet war at Sterling and Brown." Emma's picture was below it. Confident. Cold. The article painted her as a disruptor. A divider. A woke warrior trying to fix something that wasn't broken. Emma laughed bitterly when she read it. She knew the playbook. When a man cuts toxic roots, he's a reformer. When a woman does it, she's too much. Still, it stung. She had worked so hard to fix a broken system. And now people were twisting her motives. That night, she called her mother. Her mother listened quietly, then said, "Let them talk, Emma. That's all they can do, talk. You're changing lives. Don't let noise stop your music." But things weren't just hard in public. Behind the scenes, Emma was exhausted. Her schedule was packed. Meetings, reports, interviews, angry emails, tearful DMs from employees finally opening up. She barely slept. She started eating lunch at her desk again, forgetting the promise she had made to herself to take breaks. And then one day it hit her. She was burning out. The very thing she had warned others about was now happening to her. So Emma paused. She took a 3-day personal retreat, not to escape but to breathe. She went to a cabin in the woods, turned off her phone, and sat with her thoughts. She journaled, walked, slept without setting alarms. And one morning, while watching birds in the quiet dawn, she realized something. She couldn't save everyone. She could lead. She could build systems. She could fight for fairness. But she couldn't carry everyone's pain on her back. It was time to trust others, to delegate, to empower, to let the seeds she had planted grow without gripping them too tightly. When she returned, she called a team meeting, not just executives but team leads, mentors, interns. She said, "This company can't run on one person's energy. We need shared strength." Then she launched a mentorship program, one where mid-level employees could mentor new ones. Not just in skills but in integrity. She created culture councils made up of everyday staff, not just top brass. And slowly things started changing. You could feel it in the hallways. More eye contact, more open conversations, more laughter. But the price of power kept showing up in small ways. One day, a delivery man at the lobby called her sweetheart and winked. Emma didn't flinch. But she made a note to talk to building management about respectful conduct from all vendors. Another day, someone graffitied the women's restroom with, "We miss the old days." Emma didn't get mad. She called in the janitor herself, helped clean it, and then sent out an all-company message. If anyone misses a culture of fear, exclusion, and silence, this is your invitation to leave. We're building something better. She received over 200 likes on the internal system and 30 new thank you messages. One day she received a letter, handwritten. It was from a former employee who had left years ago after Daniel's harassment. The letter said, "I don't know if you remember me. We were both in the same building back then. I saw you once crying in the break room. I didn't know what to say. I left the company a week later too. I just want you to know you staying and coming back gave me hope. I never got justice, but watching you gave me healing. Thank you." Emma held the letter for a long time. And for the first time in months she cried. Not from pain. From peace. The price of power, she realized, wasn't just loneliness or stress. It was being misunderstood while still doing what's right. It was getting hit and still standing tall. It was loving people enough to be the wall between them and harm, even when they didn't ask you to. Emma was willing to pay that price. Because for every person who grumbled, there were 2 who bloomed. And that was worth everything. Emma sat by the tall glass window of her corner office. The sky outside was gray, the kind of gray that made everything feel slower, heavier. Inside her chest, she felt the same weight. It had been 6 months since she'd fired Daniel and reshaped the company's culture. The changes had been hard. She had worked non-stop. People had begun to smile more, talk more, trust a little more. But something was off. Something in the silence. In the way people suddenly quieted when she walked past. In the way Greg, the senior VP, always smiled a little too wide when agreeing with her. Emma's gut told her, something is wrong. That day she received a call from Julia, her new head of compliance. "Emma," Julia said, her voice tight, "we've received an alert from the whistleblower hotline. It's bad. You'll want to see it in person." Emma's stomach dropped. She walked down to Julia's office. There Julia handed her a printout. The complaint was from a junior employee. They claimed someone in leadership had been, again, using body language, remarks, and implied threats to make them uncomfortable. Emma frowned. Who? Julia looked at her carefully. It's about Greg. Emma stared at the name. Greg. The same man who had pushed back against all her culture reforms. The one who had smiled in meetings and nodded, even when his eyes showed annoyance. There were details, times, comments, witnesses. And worse, Julia added. This isn't the first report. 2 others came in last month, but the names were anonymous, and we didn't have enough to investigate. This one is different. The person's ready to testify. Emma felt a cold wind through her soul. They had missed it. Again. Emma called an emergency meeting with HR, legal, and Julia. She laid out the steps. Full internal investigation, interview every person mentioned, 0 tolerance. But as they prepared to confront Greg, something else happened. Greg beat them to it. The next morning, a news article dropped. Not from their team. From an outside source. Headline. Sterling and Brown in crisis. CEO Emma Blake faces internal rebellion over management style. The article painted her as a dictator. Cold. Untrustworthy. It mentioned a toxic environment. False allegations, and whispered rumors that she was firing people who didn't praise her. There were no names. No quotes. Just enough half-truths to make people question everything she had done. Emma knew instantly. Greg had leaked it. He was trying to take her down before she could hold him accountable. The story spread fast. The board started calling. Emma, what's going on? Should we do damage control? Is this going to affect our stock value? No one asked how she was doing. No one asked about the victim of Greg's behavior. Only the optics. Only the money. Emma felt tired, not in her body but in her soul. But she didn't break. Not yet. She met with the junior employee who filed the complaint. Her name was Sarah. She looked young, barely in her 20s, with nervous eyes and a trembling voice. I didn't think anyone would believe me, Sarah whispered. I almost quit. Emma took her hand. I believe you. And I won't let this get buried. Sarah nodded slowly, then cried. And right then Emma knew. This wasn't about her reputation. It was about Sarah. It was about every employee who thought silence was safer than truth. But the pressure kept rising. Greg called for a vote of confidence among senior leadership. An informal meeting meant to test loyalty. Some stayed silent. A few defended Emma. But others, including 2 longtime department heads, said she had made the company too sensitive, that people were walking on eggshells. Emma listened quietly. When they finished, she stood and said just one thing. Sensitivity is not weakness. It's awareness. And if walking carefully means fewer people are hurt, then we should all be proud of our new shoes. Then she walked out. She wouldn't beg for loyalty. She would lead without it if she had to. Days later, Greg was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But before he left, he made a scene. In the lobby where dozens of employees could see, he said loudly, "Careful, folks. If she doesn't like your tie color, you might be next." People laughed. Nervous laughter. Emma stood nearby watching. She didn't reply. She simply turned to Julia and said, "Make sure his badge is disabled by noon." The investigation confirmed the worst. Greg had been harassing not just Sarah, but 2 other women over a period of 2 years. They had texts, recordings, witnesses. Emma called a company-wide meeting. Not an email. Not a memo. A face-to-face. She stood on the stage in the company's main hall and said, "This company is not perfect. And neither am I. But I promise you I will always listen. And I will protect those who speak, even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. To anyone who's ever felt unsafe, unheard, or unimportant, this is your place now. This is your home. And to those who think the old days were better, I say this, those days are gone. You're either part of this future, or you're in the past." She received a standing ovation. But after the applause, she went to her office, locked the door, and cried. Because leadership wasn't easy. Because courage didn't always feel strong. It felt lonely. Because every step forward felt like a storm in her heart. But she kept going. She had a vision. And it wasn't just about rules or policies. It was about people. Weeks passed. Things calmed. The media eventually moved on. Employees began to smile again, this time without fear behind their eyes. New hires said things like, "I applied because I heard this company cares." One day, Sarah stopped by Emma's office. She handed Emma a small box. Inside was a bracelet. It had one word engraved on it: brave. "Thank you," Sarah said. "You changed everything." Emma smiled softly, tears in her eyes. "No," she said. "We changed everything." The morning sun poured into the glass windows of the headquarters, bathing the open-floor workspace in soft gold. Laughter echoed faintly from the break room. A new intern, barely 21, was nervously presenting a proposal to 3 executives, none of whom were frowning. This was not the same company it had been a year ago. It was not the same company Emma had walked into on her first day as a fresh-faced junior analyst. And it was definitely not the same company she had walked out of, broken and invisible, after suffering months of silent harassment. Now Emma Blake was the CEO. But more than that, she had become something else. A symbol. It had been a year since Greg's dismissal. The company had gone through waves of internal reform. Not just statements, not just policies, but actual lived change. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And today, something special was about to happen. A new company division was being launched. Not to sell a product, not to win investors, but to serve the people inside the company itself. It was called the Emma Blake Leadership Institute. It started with an idea: train the next generation of leaders, especially women, especially those who never saw themselves in charge. And it began in a small room, with just 12 hand-picked employees from different departments. Some were managers, some were still in entry-level positions. One was a janitor who had once told Emma, "I clean floors, but I see everything." Emma stood in front of them, not in a blazer this time, but in a simple white blouse and jeans. Comfortable. Human. She said, "I'm not here to teach you how to command. I'm here to show you how to lead without fear, how to listen with your full soul, and how to protect those who trust you." Then she paused, looked at each of them in the eyes, and added, "And most of all, I'm here to help you lead without becoming them." They nodded. Some even teared up. They understood. The media had mostly moved on, but a few journalists still asked for interviews. Emma turned them down mostly, until one special request came in. It was from a young reporter at a small podcast. She had written, "I don't want to talk about the scandal. I want to talk about the after. I want to know how people build after they've been broken." Emma agreed. The interview went viral. Millions of downloads. Because in the interview, Emma didn't sound like a CEO reading a press release. She sounded like a human who had walked through fire and came out with ashes in her palms and flowers in her heart. She said, "When I was young, I thought strength meant never crying. Now I know it means crying and still showing up. I thought power meant being feared. Now I know real power is when people feel safe around you. We're done with leaders who use silence as a weapon. We need leaders who speak even when their voice shakes." That quote was turned into posters. It was used in college seminars. It was turned into wall art across dozens of office spaces. Emma didn't ask for that. She didn't need to. People were hungry for something real. And Emma had become realer than anyone else at the top. But not everyone was cheering. Some industry leaders said Emma was too soft. A viral video showed one CEO laughing during a panel, saying, "We're not running therapy centers here." Emma saw it. She didn't respond. But she did do something quietly bold. She partnered with a nonprofit that offered therapy and emotional wellness services for professionals in high-stress workplaces. Every employee at her company now had access to 5 free sessions per month. Managers were required to attend emotional intelligence training. And for the first time, burnout rates at Sterling and Brown dropped by 62%. People weren't just working harder. They were happier. One evening, long after everyone had left the building, Emma walked through the halls. She liked walking the office alone sometimes. It reminded her of her early days, when she'd stay behind after work just to breathe. She passed by the old break room where Greg had once accidentally cornered her, his eyes silently telling her things his lips never said. She stopped. The room had been redesigned now. Bright, colorful, safe. But in her mind the memory was still there. A ghost. Not to haunt her, but to remind her why she had built what she did. Why it mattered. She took a deep breath. And she let the memory pass. That night at home, Emma sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and opened a letter. It was from Sarah, now a junior manager in one of the regional offices. It read, "I wanted to thank you again not just for believing me, but for building a place where I could believe in myself. I got promoted last week, and I spoke up in my first board meeting. My voice shook but no one laughed. They listened. Just like you did." Emma closed the letter, her hands trembling slightly. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the quiet, powerful joy of knowing she had changed the direction of someone's life. Not by shouting, not by demanding, but by standing tall. The next morning she received an invite. A major university wanted to award her an honorary doctorate in ethical leadership. Emma chuckled. She had never even imagined such things. Her dad used to say, "Titles don't matter if people don't respect you." And now she had both. But more than the title, she had the truth. She had built something that would last. On her last day of the quarter, Emma gathered her leadership team. She said, "I want you to understand something very clearly. We don't build culture by writing values on a wall. We build it by living them every day. You're not here to protect me. You're here to protect the people who count on us." Then she pointed to a picture frame on the wall. It showed her first desk, a tiny cubicle in the basement, from over a decade ago. There was a sticky note on it that said, "You are not invisible." The room went silent. Everyone felt it. Everyone understood. 3 months later, Emma passed on the day-to-day role to her second-in-command, a quiet, thoughtful woman named Anita, who had once been terrified to speak in public, but now ran company town halls with grace and clarity. Emma didn't step down. She stepped aside. And she became something even more powerful. A mentor. A builder. A legacy.